Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is sell. Let's look at a few definitions. The first way this verb sell is used is to mean to give or hand over something in exchange for money. And this, I should point out, this something doesn't have to be something that is tangible that you can touch. We talk about selling services, and that's perfectly okay as well. Another meaning for the verb sell is to have a stock of something available for sale. So for this particular meaning, you might be thinking of a particular store that sells a certain item or types of items. A final meaning for the verb sell is to be purchased in specified amounts or for a specified price. So in the simple present tense, you might hear someone say that an object sells for $10 or any other price. Sell is an irregular verb. To make the progressive tense, all we need to do is add ing to make selling. The past tense and participle forms, though, have a totally different spelling, S-O-L-D, and it's pronounced sold. Let's look at some phrasal verbs next. One phrasal verb you might hear is sell off, and it means to sell something cheaply because you need the money, or to sell something cheaply because you just don't need it any longer. Here's an example sentence. They sold off their furniture before moving abroad. So it might be too expensive or too difficult to move a lot of big pieces. And so that's why we might emphasize selling off because it's not needed. Another phrasal verb you might hear is to sell someone on something. And really what this means is you are trying to convince someone to do something, perhaps to believe something. Here's an example of that. He sold me on the idea of buying a new TV. So again, this is just another way to say he convinced me that we should buy a new TV. Another phrasal verb you might hear is sell out. And this can have a couple different meanings. Let's look at the first one. It's to have no more of something left because it has been bought or all quantities have been bought. So let's look at an example of that. The latest delivery of hand sanitizer sold out in 30 minutes. So all the bottles, perhaps this grocery store had or other retailer, they were able to sell every single one of the bottles that they had. And so sell out is something you might have heard a great deal of back in March and April. Toilet paper was selling out. Other household cleaners were also selling out to the point where you could not find, or many of us were unable to buy certain items because they were not in stores. The second meaning for sell out is really quite different, and it means that someone is compromising their principles in exchange for personal gain. And that personal gain is usually money. So the way you might hear sell out used is generally connected to art. Could be connected to physical art, musical art, theater, acting, those types of things. But generally the idea is that someone had very strong beliefs and ideas, but in order to make more money, they changed those ideas and beliefs. So that's the example sentence I have right here. Will the band sell out if they sign a contract with the international record label? So this idea of a big company that's well known, perhaps they might influence the direction of the band's music. This week, we're practicing active voice versus passive voice in a variety of tenses, and today we're going to talk about simple present. And you might remember we tend to use simple present to talk about facts, habits, or routines. And the difference between active voice and passive voice is sort of knowing who or what is doing the action. We are always going to start with that subject or person, thing doing the action at the beginning of simple present sentences. That person or thing that's doing the action may be present in a passive sentence, but is not always obvious. And sometimes we do that because we don't know who is responsible for the action. So let's take a look at simple present affirmative sentences. We'll start with the active voice. Here's an example sentence. They sell peaches at the farmer's market. So this is could be describing a fact, could also be describing a habit or routine as well. If my subject had just been he or she, I would need to add an S to the verb, sells. That's one tricky thing about the simple present in English. If I want to make the sentence in passive voice, though, I'm going to have two parts to this. I'm going to use a present form of be, so that's generally going to be is or are, and then the participle form of the verb. In this case, it's sold. So the object, what received the action in our first sentence, they sell peaches. Peaches received the action. That's going to move to the front of our sentence, and we'll just sort of rework it. Peaches are sold at the farmer's market. So in this sentence, you don't know exactly who is selling. You just know you can buy them, and that might be all you need to know or all somebody else wants to know. Let's look at negative sentences now in the simple present. In the active voice, to make a negative simple present sentence, we're going to use do not in the base verb or does not in the base verb. So let's take a look at an example sentence. The grocery store doesn't sell out of fruit. Okay, so their sort of habit, or again, this could be a factual statement, they just do not run out of. You will be able to find fruit in the grocery store, is what that sentence is saying. In the passive voice, I'm going to take the object or what received my action in the first sentence, fruit, and I'm going to move that to the front of the sentence. And now, negative passive voice in the simple present is going to be is not and our participle, or are not and the participle. So fruit is not countable, so we treat it as singular. Even though we might be talking about many different types or different pieces, fruit all by itself we treat as a noun count noun. So fruit isn't sold out. Next, let's look at making yes or no questions. In the simple present, to do this in the active voice, all we need to do is start with do or does, then our subject, and then the base verb. Here's an example of that. Does that store sell face masks? In passive voice, we're going to follow a similar structure, but we're going to start with our present form of be, which is generally going to be is or are, then what receives the action, and then the participle form of the verb. Here's that same sentence we're changing from active voice into passive. Are face masks sold at that store? Let's take a look at some words that are related to our verb sell. One word you might hear is seller. It's a noun, and it's a person who sells something. You might see this word sometimes used in contracts or agreements, particularly if you're looking at buying a house. There are going to be agreements between the seller and the buyer. Here's an example sentence with seller. They were the real estate company's top sellers. So people who sell other people's houses for them. Another related word is sale. It's a noun. It can have a couple different meanings. The first is just the action of selling something. So you might hear this sometimes referred to in the plural sense of sales. That's going to be in my example sentence below. Retail sales have decreased due to the pandemic. So when you think of retail, I encourage people to think of malls and the different types of stores that are in malls. They're generally retail stores as long as they're not a restaurant. But many stores like that have seen large decreases because they haven't been able to open their businesses. Another meaning for sale is a period during which a retailer sells goods at reduced prices. So for many people, this is a favorite definition for this word, right? Something's price is reduced or it's lower. So here's an example of that. The store is having a clearance sale this weekend. Another related word is salesperson. And this is a person whose job involves selling things or products. You might hear the terms salesman and saleswoman. They're a little bit older and probably not as common now. It is more common to hear salesperson, and that can be a man or a woman, doesn't matter. And that's one reason it's used more commonly. The company is hiring 10 new salespeople this month. So you'll notice in this word person, it does the same thing as if our word was just person. We go from singular, one person, to two people. Same thing happens here. Another connected word that you might hear is bestseller. And this could be a book or other product that sells in very large numbers or quantities. So here's that word in the sentence. His autobiography is a bestseller. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you'll try out the word sell as you're speaking or writing this week. Thanks for watching.